Welcome back, Guardians. As promised, I'm back with a build that lets you run the Chaperone DPS meta while still having an absolute blast in endgame content. Truly feeling like a Destiny 2 Jedi. So without wasting any more of your time, let's jump right in. Today we're using the new exotic Fortune's Favor. At first I honestly thought this exotic was a bit underwhelming, but it turns out to be an absolute gem. Fortune's Favor grants you an overshield after being out of combat for a few seconds, and while that overshield is active, your weapons receive a bonus to accuracy, stability and handling. On top of that, you also gain a damage buff as long as the overshield remains active. Even when you take damage, the overshield doesn't disappear immediately, which makes it far more reliable than it sounds. And trust me, we have a few more tricks to really make this build shine. Let's start by going over the damage rotation, and after that I'll cover the subclass, weapon, armor mods and of course the artifact. Before we begin, keep in mind that all of those tests were done at 138 weapon stat. With no buff or surges active, we hit 338 damage, which is our baseline for just normal damage. With the Fortune's Favor active, that number jumps to 367. Which is roughly a 10% increase. According to the exotic description, it can go up to 20%. So either I'm missing something or my math just isn't great. When we add weapon surgeons on top of the Fortune's Favor, we hit 448 damage, which comes out to about a 132.5% in total damage increase. Finally, we apply a debuff, such as Tether. We reach 605 damage overall, which is roughly a 80% increase for the damage. So, what's even crazier is that these numbers were achieved without a fully committing to the entire rotation. As you'll see on the screen, a non-debuff shot can reach around 576 damage, while fully buffed and debuffed shots go all the way up to 854 damage. That's roughly a 252% damage increase. Assuming my math is correct, to reach these numbers consistently, you'll want to proc Transcendence before the damage phase, use Ascension to become Radiant, throw your grenade at melee, and then go completely wild with the Chaperone or any other strong DPS weapon. This build works especially well with the Chaperone if someone in your team is running a Divinity. In that case, you can even swap something like Silence's Qual for the additional damage. And this isn't just a DPS build either. You can easily use it to clear out rooms of ads, playing the strikes, doing exotic missions. It can run everything, because the Chaperone will just swap it out for the Praxic Blade. And with the Fortune's Favor and weapon surges active almost all the time, you'll be flying through enemies and putting up massive numbers, as you can see on the screen. So let's talk about the subclass. We're running the Prismatic subclass. For your super, use whatever fits the situation, but overall I prefer the Shadow Shot Deadfall. It's great for DPS and ad clear, and it also synergizes perfectly with the Fragment Facet of Purpose. This fragment grants us a void overshield when we pick up an Orb of Power, which immediately activates our Fortune's Favor damage bonus. We're using the Acrobat Dodge to become Radiant and pairing it with the Ascension aspect so we become amplified at the same time. For our melee, we're using the Threaded Spike to sever our enemies, reducing their outgoing damage by roughly 40%. Try to catch it on return to get some energy back, although I'll admit, I forget to do that about 90% of the time. For a grenade, we are running the Duskfield grenade to freeze targets, but you can experiment with other options. Having access to multiple elemental damage types is important, and I'll explain why in a moment. One of the key aspects here is Stylish Executioner. Whenever you defeat an enemy affected by a debuff, you turn invisible, and with this build that happens constantly. For fragments alongside the Facet of Purpose, we're running the Facet of Hope for increased class ability regeneration. Since we're Radiant and Amplified most of the time, this provides a massive boost. And I believe it was something like 35% increase. We also use the Facet of Protection for some extra damage resistance, and finally the Facet of Command. This fragment reloads our weapon whenever we freeze or suppress a target, which is incredibly useful during damage phases. On top of that, defeating frozen or suspended enemies spawns stasis shards or void breaches, giving us more ability energy. Now let's move on to the weapons. We already know the Chaperone is amazing for DPS, but what about the rest of the time? That's where the Praxic Blade comes in. With the balanced form active, rapid final blows refund ammo and trigger health regeneration. After defeating a couple of targets, your damage against rank and file combatants is also increased. We're using the impact core as well, which weakens enemies on a hit since we're running a void super. This is another big reason why I stick with the void super here. You can even throw your blade and everything it hits becomes weakened and ready to take down. At this point, you essentially have a void overshield, a consistent damage buff, a near permanent invisibility thanks to the weakened targets. For a ranged option, I'm using the Uncivil Discourse because it feels great and gives us some distance, but you could also use the new Rocket Pulse Rifle with Elemental Homing. Since we apply so many different damage types, you can keep that perk fully stacked. For a heavy weapon, I'm using the Bitter End. This thing feels like a baby exotic. It's incredible fun and it can put out some surprisingly strong DPS. Let's talk armor mods. Starting with the helmet, we are running a kinetic siphon for orb generation and pairing that with the super fun mods to increase our super stats. On the arms, we're using bolstering and detonation and focusing strike to gain more class ability energy, which is crucial for staying radiant and amplified. We're also running a impact induction for our grenade energy on melee damage. On the chest, there's nothing special going on here, it's just whatever damage resistance mods you prefer. On the legs, we're using a triple kinetic weapon surge. Do keep in mind if you run something else instead of the Praxic Blade or the Chaperone to swap these surges matching your damage dealing weapon. On the cloak, we run a double time dilation, so our armor charges last longer, which is very important for maintaining our high damage. We also use powerful attraction so that when we dodge, all nearby orbs are pulled straight towards us. As mentioned earlier, this build was tested at 130 at weapon stat. Try to aim for 100 points in super, another 100 in grenade to keep those downtimes low. And then push your weapon stat as high as possible after that. Finally, let's wrap things up with the artifact. Kinetic Synthesis is extremely important for the DPS phase as it consistently regenerates ammo, so make sure you keep that one equipped. Combination Argent Blade is also very strong, increasing the damage for your Praxic Blade if you briefly pause between attacks, which sometimes could be helpful, but it could also be a little bit annoying, so I fully understand if you swap it out. During that pause though, you can throw a grenade or reposition. Power from the Pain is an absolute must-have since our Praxic Blade will weaken targets and this perk allows us to gain Devour very consistently. Then we have Singularity Blade, another strong choice. Not for the weakening effect since we already have that covered, but for the weakening burst it releases. And finally, one of my favorite perks is the Void Infestation, which spawns a small little cute void orb that jumps from the one target to the other after defeating weakened enemies. And that's it for this week's build, Guardians. More Hunter builds are on the way because I've been absolutely cooking with the new Praxic Blade. I know I'm a bit late to the party and most of these big Destiny creators already have their builds out. If you'd like to support a small creator like me, considering hitting that like and subscribe button. And I hope to see you all in the next video.